Hey kids, today I want to talk with you about the Eighth Commandment of the Ten Commandments, as we've been doing here these past couple weeks, walking through piece by piece of Luther's small catechism. And so here is the Eighth Commandment and Luther's explanation. You shall not give false testimony against your neighbor. What does this mean? We should fear and love God, so that we do not tell lies about our neighbor, betray him, slander him, or hurt his reputation, but defend him, speak well of him, and explain everything in the kindest way. So that's the Eighth Commandment. And one interesting thing about the Eighth Commandment is usually when we think about the Eighth Commandment, we think about you shall not lie, which of course is true. You should never say anything that isn't true, or intentionally lead someone astray by not giving them the full truth. But also within the Eighth Commandment and not giving false testimony is like Luther explains. We shouldn't betray our neighbor or slander him or hurt his reputation. Now those are kind of some big words to us, but really what Luther is saying is you shouldn't gossip about your friends, or you shouldn't make fun of them in front of them or behind their back. Instead, you should be nice to them. You should speak kindly to them, and you should speak kindly of them. One thing we can think about with this language in the Eighth Commandment and hearing God say we should not give false testimony about our neighbor, we can kind of think of a courtroom. Now, let's say you're talking with some of your friends, and you say of one of your other friends, oh, that person is stupid, or, you make fun of them or say something mean about them like that. Now imagine that immediately when you say that, my friend is dumb, God puts you in a courtroom, and God is the judge, and you're standing before him, and he charges you with the crime of false testimony. God says, you just called your friend dumb. How are you going to defend yourself? And, you might say, oh, well, I thought what they said, I didn't like it, and so I called them dumb. Do you know what God would say to you? God would say that friend who you're giving false testimony about, who you're gossiping about, I created that friend. I put your friend's brain in his head. I gave him the ability to think, and anyways, in school, he doesn't do all that bad. In fact, he's really quite intelligent. Well, what would you say to God? You would say, well, you're right. I have misrepresented my friend. I've said something that isn't true. Just because of my own anger or my own fear, I said these things. So what would be the better thing to say? Instead of you didn't like something your friend said, so you called them dumb, maybe you could say, what my friend said, I didn't quite understand. I know that my friend is smart, so surely they must have meant something else. You see, you can put the best construction on the situation. And then you can actually go to your friend instead of gossiping about them, and you can talk with them. And you'll find actually that your friendship will grow, and you might actually learn something and grow closer together with all your friends, and everyone will be happy, and everyone's reputation will be intact, and really the world would just be a better place. That's why God gave us these commandments. This is how God designed life to be. But back to that courtroom, one thing we can think about with God and learn from God is that God never gives false testimony. God always keeps his commandments perfectly. And so when God looks at you, he never says things that aren't true about you. But even better than that, he puts the absolute best construction on you and your relationship with him. Because when he looks at you as a Christian, as a believer in Jesus, he even sees Jesus. And so when he looks at you, he sees Jesus, and he says, you are perfect. You are a great child of God. You are the child that I've always wanted you to be. That's because through the forgiveness of sins, by claiming Jesus as our own in baptism, and having Jesus give us his life and his goodness, God sees Jesus in us. So God does the very exact opposite of giving false testimony. He gives Jesus testimony on our behalf. So we can really thank God for that, and think about that when we consider our neighbor. Should we tell lies about them? Should we speak poorly about them? Well, what has God done for us in Jesus? And how can we share that gift with our neighbor and our friends, and how we treat them?